feels risky. I mean, we always make things often worse than they actually are. It's just making pictures. Calm down.
This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I'm your host. I'm an independent curator who specializes in prints and printmaking. Today, I've got a special treat for you. In Series 3 of Platemark, we're speaking with James Ehlers, who is a professor of engraving at Emporia State University in Emporia, Kansas. What you may not know is that Emporia State has the only program in the country where you can get a degree in engraving. So why is engraving exciting to me? Engraving is a technique that had been used for many, many years in the course of reproductive printmaking, which we're talking about over on Series 2 of Platemark at the moment. But the mark making that came out of that tradition was very staid and very formulaic, and it fell off with the advent of photography because, of course, you didn't really need engravings to describe a work of art. You had photographs of that work of art. But along in the early part of the 20th century comes Stanley William Hayter, who learned engraving from another artist named Joseph Hecht. And there were a handful of other artists that were using engraving, but Hayter really brought it to the forefront of modern printmaking. There are only a handful of artists in America today who are using engraving as their primary means of image making. I can name them on, five fingers: Oscar Gillespie, Andrew Raftery, Evan Lindquist, David Barthold, and James Ehlers, my guest today. So it's a pretty rarefied kind of image making, but it's something that I adore. I love the firm crispness of the lines. It's just so elegant to me. You'll hear James talk about, well, we do geek out on Hayter, as you might imagine. He's a fan, as I am. But toward the end, we start talking about the different kinds of metals that you can engrave into. He has engraved into brass, into copper, into zinc, and into steel. And we talk about how many pulls you can get off of each kind of plate. So stay tuned for that. Well, hello, kitty cat. Meow, that's Harry. It's funny that he just walked in because during the taping with James, you can see me on the video bend over to pet Harry to try and keep him quiet. See if you can spot that. And also, you'll get a glimpse of the yellow lab that jumps on the bed behind me. Her name was Sky. She sadly is no longer with us. Okay, let's see. Housekeeping. Any images we talk about are over on platemarkpodcast.com. Also over there is a support and donate button. You can press that and decide what kind of donation you'd like to send over to the Platemark people. That's me sitting in my office. But it will help us keep the lights on. It is a labor of love, and I make zero money from it. Also, my positionality. I identify as a cis-het white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record this in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Okay, I think that's it. Buckle up, let's go. James, it is great to see you. I'm glad we got to talk before the school year got rolling because it sounds like things are crazy there. Can you tell our listeners what your name is and who you are, where you are, what you do for a living?
My name is James Ehlers. I am the department chair at Emporia State University. I'm also the engraving arts professor. Emporia State is in Emporia, Kansas. And yeah, that's what I've been doing. I just took over as chair in 2021, which is an awesome time to do it. And but I've been working at Emporia State since 2007.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah, been here a little bit.
So the reason I reached out to you, obviously, is because I have a well-known love of engraving because of my interest in studies of Stanley William Hayter, who revived engraving in the 20th century, as we know. But it wasn't until Evan Lindquist, who's a contemporary engraver, said to me, there's this program at Emporia State. I was like, I'm sorry, what? I had no idea there was such a thing. So can you tell people, are you the only engraving program in the country?
That is correct. And your confused reaction was very similar to mine whenever I saw the job posting for it. So right out of grad school, I was looking for tenure track positions, and I saw this one come up, and I had to reread the posting a bunch of times just to make sure. I was like, this is my jam, and there's a job just to do that. and applied for it and got the job. But the engraving program here, my background is primarily in printmaking and working figuratively, and that was the type of work that I was doing in grad school. But the program here, I had to learn a ton in order to satisfy the needs and interest of the students that came. So there's this whole different side of engraving that I learned about in the process, more so, from print to objects and different types of objects and like knives, firearms, jewelry, those types of things. Which it's a it's it's a pretty much the same tool. It's just different imagery and a different canvas to work on.
Yeah, there are people who make their living as engravers in jewelry shops and doing trophies and all sorts of stuff. And I had never really, I mean, of course they're of course they're parallel, duh. And the printed part of it comes straight out of arms and armor, right? So yeah, it makes complete sense. But I just never thought about like there being an actual, sort BFA that you could get in order to become one of those people. I was like, what? What? So I had to talk to you.
Yes.
Cool thing is about the engraving on objects is that, you engrave it and that's the end. But with paper, you have to go through a whole other process, the rest of it, the printing of it. So it's kind of I don't know, it's not half of it, but sometimes it feels like a half job.
The objects are obviously far more expensive because they're unique objects. So they obviously command more money. The prints are because of the labor that goes into them can still be expensive, but not at the level of like a firearm or some other type of object. Just because we can get so many because we can get multiples from it.
Well, that's something I just hadn't really thought about till just the second. The conceptual difference between, engraving a knife or a firearm being a unique object versus the multiplicity of printmaking. It's so counterintuitive for those of us who are fully in the print part of it. It's great. I love it.
And but on that note, what's quite funny about that is on the other end of the spectrum where some of these folks are it didn't they're not immersed in the print world. They see the plate is more as the complete work than the print. So there's this interesting different type of relationship with the matrix in those different two different worlds.
Right. Theirs isn't the Matrix, is it?
No, no.
Yeah, it is. Gosh, it's amazing to me that the worlds could be so far apart, but could be so tied up in each other. It's so amazing. What's your favorite thing to engrave? Do you enjoy doing the engraving as unique object, or do you like the printing part?
I go back and forth between the two, and so it's a little hard. Working on a plate's familiar, so sometimes that's a little comforting, and it also depends on the conceptual drive at the moment. I had read this book on habits, and it said you really need to pick a lower amount of things to take on. And I have a habit of working on like 20 things at the same time. That's not an exaggeration. And a lot of them are objects, a lot of them are plates, and more recently, is especially taking on chairs. Like I have to put my focus on one thing now because I don't have as much time. So right now, I'm working on plates, and I decided that this would be an awesome time to work about 4 times larger than I usually work. I don't know
Lots of
why.
white space.
Sure. Working on objects is cool too, and I've gone through periods where that's all that I've done. And sometimes I'll do stuff that that sometimes correlates with the class too, with the technique I'm working on with the class, because it takes so long for them to finish anything. It's just the nature of the process, right? That I'll often have things there too. So what am I going to do for 3 hours? Hang over people and just watch them work. So I'll work on something at the same time as them, and I have it on monitors. I have screens in the room, so there's a camera that's attached to my microscope, so they can see exactly what I'm doing. So they get
Wait,
to
hold on.
watch
Back up. Wait, wait, wait. You work in a microscope.
for some things, like for really small things. I'll work with a microscope, like jewelry, like little pendants or rings or things like that. I do have a few videos on my YouTube and my Instagram, uh, which my Instagram is just my Jellers 928, Jehlers 928. So I do have some on there where you can that were recorded with the camera under the microscope, so you can see the view. Some of them are sped up, and I've learned to write in the text, "This is sped up," uh, just so just so people know, if they're asking me to do a commission, no, it doesn't happen this fast.
Managing
So
expectations.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the students get to see, a demo with that, but they also get to see if I'm just doodling, just working on something, and they can, if they take a break from what they're doing, or it also helps me critique their work. I can just put it under there, and everyone can see it. If we have a group critique, that's always been the challenge. Is the object is so tiny that it's hard to demo. It's hard to see what's going on, and then so that really helped resolve that problem.
Well, you've given me a great idea. When we used to teach the history of prints at the Baltimore Museum, we'd have 25 printmakers in the room and they'd be looking at little Durer prints. That's a great idea for the future.
And I should really give a shout out to the company that sponsors the program, because it was really them that they did this. That's what their shop looks like. So the company is called the Glendo Corporation. They're out of Emporia, and they have a product line called GRS Tools, and those are specifically engraving tools. These are air powered tools. So they're like, I have a part of one. I don't have the whole thing, but I can show it at least on the camera here. So it
Oh, wow.
looks like that. I kind of jokingly say that, it's got this industrial, intense, cool looking design. It's like the RoboCop of gravers. But there's a little hole right here. That's where air feed goes into, and then there's a button on the back.
So it's a
And
vibratory thing?
yeah, it's like a little jackhammer when it's activated.
Oh, wow.
So it's designed to cut into really hard material. So a lot of gun engravers use that. Not all of them. Some of them still you use traditional hammer and chisel. But they've been manufacturing these tools for, I think they were invented in 1977, and they've just evolved and adapted all of these years. So they fund this entire program. My position is an endowed position, and they renovated that room. And I tried to model it to be somewhat similar to what their facilities look like. So when I went to their facilities and saw the camera and the monitors, like,
Perfect.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, seriously. But back up. You said hammer and chisel.
Sure,
Okay, so maybe we should talk materials when you are first of all, when you're engraving something that's going to be on a rifle or something, you're working flat and then the metal gets bent around the object?
sure,
Okay.
correct.
Right? Okay. Well, I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah, what you have to do is it's locked in a vise, right? So it's if people thought engraving on a flat plate was slow, that's all. Engraving on a round object's a whole different level, especially when you're doing really tight curves, the scroll work, getting that just right. So those smooth, fluid looking scroll lines that go across a smooth surface, they look like they were done in one shot. And I assure you they were not. There was probably about 20 lines, or give or take, depending on the size, just put together, like maybe working a few millimeters at a time. kind of
What?
just depending.
Oh my
So,
god.
or it all depends on the type of graver you're using too. I tell my students that if they're going to cut on something round, they have to make sure that they're not changing the angle too much, because the angle will gradually change, or they have to adapt with their hand. And then to never cut downward,
Oh.
as the odds of slipping dramatically increase when you cut down. So if you're able to cut in an upward direction, stop, turn the object, cut a little more, turn the object, and so on.
But getting those lines oh my god, I don't know how you're doing it.
It's it's not. I mean, when I first saw it, I was pretty baffled by it. I was like, "How?" I had the same question. It's like, "How do you do that?" And then it's really not that bad.
But so what kind of metal is it on those knives and the rifles and stuff?
Oh, it's always steel. It's almost
Steel,
always steel.
which is obviously much harder than copper.
Absolutely,
Okay. I'm not a metallurgist,
absolutely.
so I don't know.
I'm not either.
In the if I was to look up the engraving department catalog of courses, does it say three-dimensional engraving object things and then the next class is flat engraving to be printed? I mean, do you separate the two?
I just have them listed as engraving one and engraving two, which I am probably going to change the names of those classes in the future to better reflect, like what you're saying, what goes on. But in engraving one, that's like a cross hatching modeling form, figurative type of class that we do prints in. So there's a lot of it. The challenge is we have to deal with two things at once in that class. One is getting acclimated to the tool, which is a challenge in of itself. And then the other thing is, well, how do you render tone exclusively with line? And I mean, we do that is touched on in the basic drawing class here, but I have to go a lot more deep into that. I'd like to think that even if someone just takes that class for me and no others, that they can at least crosshatch really well when they're done if they want to apply that to their drawing.
Do you have I forget who it was that Andrew Raftery. He has these two sheets of acetate, I guess, with different curves of parallel lines that he overlays each other to judge when the moire is going to start.
I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, well, do you know when you're looking at an engraving online, and if it's a very regimented parallel line hatching situation, and it's like maybe a curve around a forearm or something, that the it starts buzzing visually on the digital display monitor, whatever you're using, because of the closeness of the or the I don't even know what the technical term is. I'm gonna have to go patch this back in. But that there's this thing that's called moire where it all gets interfered and you can't the camera can't read it.
Oh, I do know what you're talking
I knew you
about.
would.
As far as like you said, there's some type of tool that
Well,
he uses.
I think it was. I think he made it himself. This is the artist Andrew Raftery, who's a
Yeah.
right. You know him. Everyone knows
Yes.
him if you're interested in engraving. But I feel like he gave a demo at some point, and he had these two pieces of acetate where he could squish make the lines closer and almost more parallel to each other to show you where it was that you had to stop, that you couldn't go farther.
Oh, how the okay, I understand, like, how the lines overlap without before it becoming a mess,
Yes, that's
essentially.
a better
Yes.
way to
Yes, I
in
understand.
layman's terms.
Yes.
Simplify, simplify.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought so. I mean, when it happens, it's just like, whoa, your eyes go kind of buggy. It doesn't
I
read very well, and you get distracted by it. You know, all the things that happen.
mhm.
So, what can you take us back to? I mean, I don't want to go back to kindergarten when you decided you could draw and make things look like a thing, but
Sure.
like, when did you discover that engraving was a thing that you might be interested in doing? Why would you ever come across that? You know?
It's a bit out of nowhere, to be honest, but you I just to touch on kindergarten for a second?
Please do.
I've been drawing since elementary school, and I was really into drawing horror movie characters. So all of my I don't know where they went. So I was obsessed with drawing like Freddy Krueger and Jason and all that stuff. So oddly enough, oh, it was actually Michael Jackson's Thriller. It was the Thriller video that got me really into drawing. And I remember watching the making of Thriller, and I thought I wanted to be a visual effects makeup artist. Uh, but we didn't, have those types of things where I lived or where I grew up. So I just drew
Where did you grow
all of
up?
that stuff. Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Oh, okay.
But jumping ahead, fast forward, I wasn't even an art major in college. I started I started going as a business major, and I registered the last day I possibly could under the encouragement of my girlfriend at the time and the support of my dad. And yeah, it was literally the last day I could possibly do it. I thought I was going to be a business major because that's what I was told that I should do. Not actually by my dad, it was my girlfriend. because she because she was a business major. She was like, "Well, okay, I guess I'll do that." I think about a year and a half in, it was suggested to me to it's like, "Well, you draw. Why don't you take a drawing class?" It's like they do that in college. You can take
Oh,
drawing classes.
wait,
You
where
gotta
did you go to
understand, it's been
school?
pretty naive
Where'd you go to
at
school?
the McNeese State University.
Wait, where's that?
That's in Lake
Louisiana.
Charles. Mhm. And it's pretty naive. I'm a first generation college student. So I mean, looking back, there's so many things that I was so naive about. I didn't quite get. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know that was a thing until like maybe about 5 years ago. Yeah, about a year and a half in, I took my first drawing class, and that was with Professor Jerry Wubin, and he's at the time he was the printmaking professor there, and he was like, "Oh, you draw really well. You should take a printmaking class." What is that? I don't even know what that is. I didn't even know you could take a drawing class. So so he showed me etchings in the hallway, and I got to tell you, like just the process of getting the ink on the paper and to make it look like a pen drawing, it made no sense to me how the embossment or any of that worked. So I can understand when people come in, like prospective students come in or friends or whatever that don't understand it. Like I can identify with that utter confusion of how does that image get on the paper. So I took a print class with him, and he's very intaglio heavy. So we just did etchings that semester, and I think it was about around midterm. I came into class one day, and I saw this probably about 36 inches wide, the plate size, 36 inches wide, probably about by 12. So it's this landscape, these dynamic looking trees combined with it was sugar lift combined with engraving, but I didn't know
Mm,
what that was at the
mhm.
time. So I asked, "How did you get those really fluid calligraphic types of marks on there?" And that was the first engraving I ever saw was by him, and I have that print.
Aw,
I was able to get it from him, which
isn't
I
that the
should
beauty of prints? You can have one and I can have one.
Yeah, yeah, so I should really have that framed somewhere because that was a very transformational piece for me, and, he taught how to do it. He didn't require it, but I asked, so he did a demo in the class on how to do it, and I couldn't do it at all. To save my life, could not do it. Get the tool to move through the metal, so I got obsessed with it, and, I mean, he kinda, you know there's a bit of mystique, I guess, at the time, kind of attached to it, and maybe there still is to a certain degree, but pre-internet, right? I worked at a movie theater, and, well, I was so frustrated with not being able to use the tool that I decided, I'm gonna take printmaking the next semester, and I'm only gonna engrave, but to prepare for that during winter break, I worked at a movie theater, and I had a little plate with me, and every day when I was selling tickets in the box office in between movies, I would make cuts on it, just trying to develop the muscle memory. I just got obsessed with it. And then the next semester I came back and I knew that he typically would let people do open projects in the next level. So that's why I chose to do that. So I'm very thankful he let us do that. But the first project he said, you can do whatever you want, but it has to be 18 by 24.
Oh,
Yeah. So I used to get teased that that plate was my significant other because I spent so much time with it. Including him. He teased me about it too.
oh.
He was a great professor. He's a very funny person.
Do you
Very
happen to know
sharp.
what his training was? Did he study at Atelier 17 by any chance?
He first picked up engraving. He went to University of Colorado, and he studied with Jack Orman. That was who the professor was at the time. I'm not sure when he retired. I also have one of his prints too.
Oh,
So that's who he initially learned engraving from, and then he went to IU and studied with Rudy Pizzotti. And
okay. All right.
yeah,
Ormond did.
no, my Jerry,
Jerry did. Okay.
yeah,
So Pizzotti studied with Lazansky, who studied with Hayter.
yes,
So
yeah,
you have a direct line to Hayter.
yeah. Can't get
No,
away
nobody
from him.
can because he's everywhere.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, he went to IU, and then he ended up getting the job at McNeese, and that's kind of how it worked out. So it's funny that lineage is funny. I tell my students that too, especially when I bring up like Lazansky. It's like, oh, you have Lazansky lineage, it's this family tree or whatever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. When I was working on a big Hater project, that was my one of my goals was to create a online family tree that would sort of codify the beginnings of it, but eventually would enable you to add yourself as a person to trace your line back so that we had a better sense of who everyone was and where they were.
That is super cool.
It would be if I could pull it off.
I believe in you. You
I
can
just need a
pull it off.
sponsor.
Yeah, that would be amazing, and that would be a cool visual for selfish reasons. I can show my class, but
I know.
yeah, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, the centennial of the founding of the Atelier in Paris in 1927 is nigh. So
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah.
hoping I can convince somebody to help me do that.
Speaking of which, and I'll just mention this. I know I emailed you it. I got asked to about looking at some work in the provost office at the university here. So they wanted to switch some work out. So it's like, oh, I'll just go look and see what's there already. And I'd never been in the provost office. I've been in the lobby area, but never in the actual office. And I walked in, and probably maybe about 15 feet away from me, I immediately knew it was a hater on the wall and couldn't believe that it was there. And it's like, this has been here the whole time. And I had no idea. And I'm kind of nerding out in front of the admin. I'm like, this is one of the most important printmakers of the 20th century right here. And y'all don't want it? I'll put it on my wall.
I was going to say
Uh,
it'd be better in your classroom for all of your students.
and I understand they've had, they just wanted some new work. It was no slight to any of the work that was up. All the work is really cool.
Well, and it's better to put in the dark for a few minutes anyway.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So the university has a collection of most universities do through either alumni donations or something. There's usually some art spattered around, and it's great that there's a hater there. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I immediately ran back to where the collection was to see if there was another one, and that was the only one.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
The one that you sent me the picture of is a classic multicolor whiplash engraving figure thing. Very classic hater. And they do go for a fair amount of money. But I have to tell you that some of the later uh sort of late 60s, 70s, early 80s prints are really affordable. I have 2 on my walls.
Oh, do you?
I do. I'll send you a picture. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
this often happens with artists. There's the classic moment of that artist when they become known for that one thing, and then if they change and evolve and grow or whatever, people don't necessarily like the later stuff. So I'll send you a website where you can pick up something really spiffy
Oh,
for not very much money.
okay, cool.
Yes. I mean, I'll include a link to this particular gallery in Paris. No, they're not in Paris. They're in France. Michelle Champetier. She has a big collection of Hader, and they're
Oh,
mostly
wow.
later, and they're mostly really affordable.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah.
I think, my 2 all-time favorites by him are Amazon and Combat. Those are my
Oh, okay. Yeah.
if I could have I know those aren't cheap, but I'm
No,
just saying
you have
those
good
are
taste.
I love those 2 so much. Amazon was the first one I ever saw.
Okay.
I've never seen it in person. It was in a book that I saw.
What?
Yeah, I've seen some in person, but I've never seen that one.
What?
Yeah.
We got to get you out. You got to start traveling, man.
I travel, but it just doesn't occur to me. Most of my traveling is with my wife, and then I guess we go do other things. But
Well, yes, and I know you know this, but I love to remind people that if you're interested in a particular artist like Hader, and you say you're traveling to New York, maybe, and you look up Hader in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, you can make an appointment and go see them.
yeah, I've done that at the Spencer here. They're very good about that. They have an awesome print room, and
Yes, they do.
they have a killer impression of Night, Death, and Devil.
Yes, they do. My friend Kate Myers, the curator there,
Oh,
give her a shout. She took over from when Steve Goddard, who was a very well known and beloved curator who had been there forever and ever and ever, finally retired. I don't know, 5 years ago maybe. So
hmm,
she's holding down the fort there in Lawrence. I was talking to the now retired director of the Chazen Museum of Art, which is at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and he was describing to us the nature of university museum collections is often based on print collections because they were affordable because of the art department trading prints, and like there's this whole reason that that's usually the largest part of the collection and the first part of the collection. So so if you're near a university, listeners, you can check it out and see if they've got a print collection. Go check it out.
and I think I was that was the Tandem uh, podcast.
It
I
was, we
I
yes, Russell Penchenko, the former director, is married to Paula Penchenko, who is the director of Tandem Press. Yes.
okay, yeah, I listened to maybe about 5 of them. I listened to
Oh,
that
aren't you
one.
sweet?
Yeah, I listened to the Goltzius. I listened to both of the Reformation ones.
Oh, yeah.
Our graphic designer, he took an engraving class with me over the summer, and oh my god, he's taken to it so fast. He is making some killer work, and I got him hooked on your podcast too.
Oh,
He's
thanks.
so shout out to John Decker. He is a listener, and he's also a very good engraver, and he hasn't even been doing it for a year.
I feel like that must have been what happened with Hater, that there are people who, I mean, they don't maybe take to it like a duck to water, but for them, there's a certain facility of, and it makes sense, and thinking backwards, and all of that stuff that makes printmakers different because they think differently backwards.
Yeah.
But that equally that there are people who take to engraving because they just, I don't know, somehow can, like, if you watch videos of Hader engraving, when you said it took 20 cuts to make he's just swooping along. I mean, it takes time, but it's not
Yeah.
hours. He's facile. Practice, 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 I guess.
Yeah, and I gave a project in my intro class that's very Hater-esque, where I talk to them about Hater, talk about the automatic line, and explain, oh, well, automatic writing, automatic line, like those relationships, and have them give it a go just so they can develop the muscle memory without the pressure of having to do some type of spectacular rendering. And I feel like without that particular inhibition, they're able to develop quicker.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, his whole point was, I think, to your point about muscle memory, just, getting familiar enough that you weren't second guessing yourself every second.
Yeah, and I had been doing that for years, and then I watched your hater lecture on YouTube. Everyone go watch it.
Oh, thanks,
If you like hater, well, if you like perma, you can just watch it. Uh, and it was so cool to see. Well, that's how he taught people. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So that, that's how he taught people how to engrave.
Right. And there are, Hayter lived until 1988. He was 88 years old when he died. And he was still going into the shop, which is still there, by the way, in Paris. You guys can all go see the shop. You have to make an appointment. But there are people who are running around as master printers today, like Jim Stroud of Center Street Studio, who studied with him in Paris in 1980, 81. I mean, there are people running around who can tell you stories about working with him still.
Was the one you're talking about, is that part of the PowerPoint that you had on?
Yeah, it was
Because I
there were
remember.
13 states.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very cool image.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
is.
very cool image.
Yeah. Yeah, and he printed an edition of that not too long ago, and they're like $400 or something. Like, it's not. I mean, don't quote me on that, but
Sure.
yeah, but that's the beauty of prints. Like, you can pick up something that's a really wonderful example of that experience with Hayter in Paris, for under $1,000. Like, it's kind of great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your own work?
I've kind of I go through different phases in my stuff, and it's been an interesting exploration. I kind of don't know where to start. uh, uh,
Well, I think the influence of your early, horror movie, that kind of
yeah,
imagery comes through. Because if you look online in your WordPress website, there's a lot of skulls and roses and things.
there's I guess the gore never left.
Who doesn't love
Um,
gore?
Actually, I don't.
Oh, I can't stand watching
Oh,
the movies, but I do love a
uh,
skull in art.
let me rephrase that. I think I like it in art, and that's about it.
Me too.
Uh, if it's utilized as a form of allegory in a piece of art, then it's more accessible to me, I suppose. In grad school, I'd say half of the work I did initially, like at the beginning, was really about anxiety. Did a whole series about anxiety, specifically social anxiety, and then it evolved. I don't know how I got from that to making work, representational work about rotting animals. But yeah, it was my whole thesis show. It was in '05 when I graduated
Where did
from
you go?
UF.
UF. Wait, you have to be clearer than that,
I'm
James.
sorry. So used to saying that. University of Florida. I was doing that for a while, and kind of writing, I guess, the whatever success that I had with the work from grad school, and I was getting into a lot of shows. But then after a while, I had this moment where I was trying to talk to my students about ideas for work, because some of them would get stumped if you make the project open. So a bit challenging for some people. And I just said, what do you talk about? What do you think about? What do you read whenever you look things up? Like, what are those things? And they can be anything. It's a starting point. Like, what are you repeatedly interested in? And just kind of letting them know that the starting point isn't the answer. It's the starting point. You can start here and then evolve to something cool. I started reflecting on what I was making, and I'm like, I don't think about any of this.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a moment. I mean,
Oh, wow.
I used to think about that
Yeah.
type of work, but I was like, now I'm just going through the motions.
It's interesting what you said about asking your students to think about what they think about a lot, because that's exactly what Hader would do. That was a part of the whole surrealist thing. The whole automatic thing had to do with, for him, had to do with draw. He would just draw, 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 and he talked about, the whatever the thing, the form. Basically, he hated the word doodle, but basically he was doodling. And if a certain figure, like the one that appears in Amazon, shows up again and again, he felt that that was worthy of looking at more closely, and would necessarily be, in Carl Jung's theory, something that everyone could relate to. It was one of the archetypes. So that he was linking his subconscious, sort of ideas that kept popping up and popping up, as sort of a universal symbol of something.
Yeah. That actually reminds me, I'm going to take a detour from talking about my work for a second. An artist that you should know if you don't already, but I also worked with an artist named Oscar Gillespie.
Yeah.
Do you know? Okay.
Well, we're friends on
And
Facebook.
okay, he works. I mean, your description is very similar to I would think how he would describe some of his working process, or how he talks to his students about ideas. I remember him telling stories of how he would just lay out sheets of paper and then make marks on them and jump back and forth, whatever whatever comes out of it would come out of it. And that's how he does a lot of, I don't know if that's how he still works, but that's how he would do studies for some of his prints. And there was this one print, the first print of his I ever saw was in a catalog, and it was one of those print moments where it's seared in my memory. It was so awesome. And it's called Red Dog Fetish. It was my undergrad professor showed me this catalog, and it had that in it. So that was the first work of his that I ever saw, and I'm really lucky that I have that print.
Oh, you got one.
Yeah, I have. I'm super lucky that I have two prints in my collection that are pivotal moment prints for me. He's an incredible engraver and great storyteller, and very very uh, technically proficient in a ton of things. Very very smart guy. Going back to my work in that moment where you're not making things that you're thinking about, that's kind of a scary moment because I felt like I had to start over, and it's risky. It feels risky. I mean, we always make things often worse than they actually are. It's just making pictures. Calm down. So I used to have these reoccurring nightmares for years when I first moved to Kansas, that the moon was crashing into the earth. I'd have them like all the time, and they were all a little bit different. So I decided, well, that's you're thinking about that, you're dreaming about that a lot. So why don't you make a little series about that? So I took pieces of the Four Horsemen, the Dürer Four Horsemen, and I would put them in new compositions, and they were all in bars. So it was like an apocalypse scene in a bar. And they were all really small, as I was looking at the little masters at the time, so I wanted
Right.
to make a series of small prints, and that felt a little less risky to work that small too. So the first one in the series is called Death Walks into a Bar. So it's both, kind of sound like the beginning of a joke, right? And it's me, my brother, and my sister sitting at a bar, or this specific bar that has since closed in Emporia. And then the rest of the three are in the same bar, with the bar gradually, the roof falling apart. My description of it sounds like these would be really cool prints, but they're not very good. They're they're okay. It was an experiment.
Are they on your website?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I don't have much very old work on there, and I also don't have new work on there either.
Yes,
I need to get some newer stuff
always
on
the
there.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when all is said and done and the episode is up, I'll include a link to your website, and
Sure.
if that spurs you to take a moment and put some new pictures on,
Yeah, you can put my Instagram handle
I
too.
could do that too.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
both would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Of course.
so that was the beginning of starting to move somewhere else, and it was a figurative exploration where I was looking at old master compositions and just trying that out. I hadn't really done that, like explored those types of compositions and work, and I wasn't very good. I was okay at it. It's really hard to do. um, Hard to do well. It's hard to do
Right, right.
well. I want to say this is maybe 2013, 2014. I started making work that was about social media. And the first print I ever did, it was actually part of a print exchange. And I use print exchanges because they're themed and they challenge me to make work that I don't normally do. And it was some type of communication theme, I think, or I can't remember what it was. But I did a Twitter bird, but I did a rotting, like sort of realistic Twitter bird, so it looked like a zombie-ish Twitter bird, which I had hoped would show that it was supposed to symbolize toxic communication. It's a toxic communication platform, or can be. I always tell people when I start talking about this, I do not altogether hate social media. I just really don't like parts of it. I think parts of it are problematic.
Oh, for sure.
For a while, I mean, I think probably about 7 years. So it was the only kind of work I was making was somehow some kind of allegorical reference to social media and culture and fighting and paranoia and all those all those wonderful things that can bring out of people.
But, that's what prints do so well, right? They shine a mirror upon our own society, right?
Which is what actually got me interested in reading about the printmaking and the Reformation, which is why I wanted to listen to that podcast in particular. I got a nice book on it for Christmas. I admittedly only read the print section. Uh, so, uh,
That's all I would have read too.
but that idea of an entire group of a mass of people becoming used to the way a new technology communicates to them and the effects that it has on all those types on all those people. Some people, can see through it. Some people look at it as I guess gospel or whatever. And seeing to a certain degree those types of parallels and what we're all experiencing now, except on I don't know how many cycles of steroids. It's just yeah, it's a whole different intense animal, global animal. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
no, you're right for sure. Have you looked at David Avery's work?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay.
I'm familiar with his work.
It's funny because
Antalio artist.
yeah, he does
Yeah,
etching. Yeah.
yeah,
But he works small and he often does the sort of twist on art history. Like he did a great series of the holds as disgracers, but they're, like there's a hip hop guy holding a, there's all sorts of them. They're in jeans and whatever.
yeah,
The way you talk, you have really interesting parallels with Tom Huck, but Huck works huge and in woodcut,
yeah.
and he is like a nonstop talker. So you're like the
Yes.
quiet version, working small, same kind of ideas. He's big and loud,
Yeah.
It's so funny. If you guys haven't met, we should introduce you.
Oh, I know Tom.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, we're he's amazing. He's an amazing person. He's a force of a person.
He is.
I was lucky enough to have been invited to I think it was a 1 week residency with me, Sean Star Wars, and Michael Barnes. God.
Oh, right. The
Yeah.
lithographer. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. All I mean, amazing people. And I got invited to do this and I'm like, why am I here
There's a
with
new
with
club
these
for
with
you.
these with these amazing artists? But yeah, I did that residency. I guess it was 2019
Okay.
when the three of us went out there and did that.
Have you gone to New York to the print fairs and wandered about?
Nope, I have not. Tom's brought it up to me before.
You have to. You have to do it.
Because I know he goes and he's mentioned it before to me. He mentioned I'm trying to remember. I remember the acronym Saga. a society
Oh,
of
the Society of Graphic Artists,
yeah.
American Graphic Artists.
He mentioned
Yes.
that to me,
Are
and
you a member?
no, he mentioned it to me as something that I should consider joining.
Yeah, you should. I'm
Um,
jurying their next well, I'm choosing the prizes from the show that they're putting together of their members.
oh, cool.
Yeah, first
So
time I've been asked.
I saw the congrats.
Thank you.
That's
Very
it looks
excited.
like it looks like a cool organization. I saw that the application they have two application dates, and I believe the next one's October. So
Okay.
I'll try to
Oh,
get
yeah.
something ready for that.
You should. Oh, that'd be great. There's so much to see, and you can sell things, which is always good.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So getting money for your hard earned work.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you sell through a gallery or are you self representing?
I've done that before, and I'm not doing it right now. I should do it because handling the work can be awkward. Um, I've sold stuff just by posting it on Instagram, and I'll like write, "Hey, have this." Direct message me, and then but the thing I'm able to do with that is since it's not framed and since it's not a gallery handling it, I ask like for maybe about half of what I normally would. So part of the reason why I'd been doing that more recently is because it's less cost prohibitive to people that I know want the work or have expressed interest in the past, and I want them to be able to have it. So but on the same token, if you get into a gallery, you have to cut that out. Uh, so maybe at some point I'll do it. I think with the newer body of work that I'm working on now, I will do that, uh, because this is the most excited I've ever been about any work I've been making. It's not social commentary at all. uh, I've been doing I've been doing all these allegorical memento mori ish still lifes, and I feel like there's a certain type of honesty, and it's really personal work that I'm making. And the cool thing about utilizing allegory in your work is you can talk about really heavy things without saying what they actually are. Just allude to them in the work. Since I started on these, this is the most excited I've been about making any work. I mean, they're large and they're intense to work on, and I don't care because I enjoy doing it so much.
That's all I
It's
can
gonna
ask for.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while to finish them because they're pretty large and detailed. But yeah, I'm
Well,
really excited.
as a point of reference and your metric of time, I'm sure you know this. It takes Andrew Raftery 10 years to make every project.
Wow.
And they're usually a portfolio of 5 or 7, or the set of 12 dinner plates, or 10 years.
Oh, I'm trying to finish five
You're
a
ahead of
year.
that. See, you're doing good.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a five a year, but he works very differently than I do,
Yes.
so I can understand that with the types of marks that he mark making that he's using.
On his preparatories, I don't know if you've looked at all of he builds maquettes of the houses, so
Oh
he gets
yeah,
like the whole nine
yeah,
yards. So it's no wonder it takes so long. They're always worth waiting for, though.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful work.
yeah, for sure. Have you published with anybody or worked with a print shop?
I did with Huck at Evil Prints. They printed something, and I did at K State, and I did. If you're talking like Tandem or like a big print house like that, no, I haven't. But I've done it. It's at different schools,
Schools,
but
right? Okay.
nothing quite that big. There was a printmaking residency in China, Guanlin. If I hope I'm saying it right, it's a really large printmaking facility. It's huge, and I went in 2009, and they pulled a couple of editions for me there. I was there, I think, maybe 2 weeks. I wasn't there for very long.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yeah,
Cool. All right. Well, we'll get you. Well, I'm going to think about who I should introduce you to.
I need to finish some work.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah, I gotta finish work first. And
Yeah.
and I think like the newer stuff I'm working on now has a lot to do. I have a friend that's really into meditation and mindfulness and all those things, and he's given me all types of literature and things to watch, and that's in part what helped me start this path on this work. Just thinking about, because a lot of them are like they're like anxiety still lifes, and the thought that any piece of anxiety that comes up or stress or that comes up is it's all just reminding yourself that it's temporary. So like all things are temporary. So just working through that on the plate. So it's a little art therapy ish,
Okay. Little
I
mind
guess.
like water.
Yeah. So
Not easy though, is it?
with some of the larger works, when I get overwhelmed with like I'm never going to finish this, I grid them off with a marker. So this new one of the ones I'm working on now, I'm looking at it right now, has a grid drawn on it, and I have an objective to. I try to give myself a square inch at a time to
Oh.
focus on, so I feel like I'm finishing something. So that just that feeling of accomplishment instead of like this is never gonna, like, I'm enjoying myself, but at the same time it's huge. So I have to give myself that I can pull the plate over maybe and
Yeah,
just
well, I'd love to see it. That's interesting. It's overwhelming enough that setting. Oh, look at you! Wow. Wait, what are you engraving on?
that's zinc.
Zinc.
Yeah. I just realized I have notes written on here. Hopefully there's nothing
But zinc, I thought
nothing
zinc was
bad.
too soft and nubbly.
That is to print with?
Yeah.
That is that is not true.
Okay.
That is, yeah. I don't know if the sheet metal from in the 50s, 60s or whatever was a different alloy, but this works just fine.
Wait, so you're always engraving on zinc, not copper?
I go back and forth.
Do you?
I'm lucky enough to have I haven't bought a plate in a while.
Oh,
So
how do you
so
manage that?
I just get lucky. Some of them are just given to me, like some of these zinc ones were given to me, and I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna use it," and it's also faster to cut on, so even
Oh, it is
better.
faster.
Oh, it's way faster.
Oh, okay. Well, that's worth it.
Jerry, my undergrad professor, engraved on zinc.
Okay.
I think the largest edition I've ever pulled on a zinc plate and there was no compromise to the integrity of the image, was a 60.
Wow,
So it's fine. It
that's
works
a
just fine.
lot,
Yeah.
huh?
I
What
don't
are you
usually
getting up?
print that much,
Yeah. What are you
but
getting? Right. What are you getting off of copper?
the highest I've ever printed on a copper plate was 200. The most I've
Wow.
printed off copper was 200. We have a bike race here that I make a prize for, and the first so many finishers that beat the sun. They finished the race before the sunset. I should say that the race is 200 miles.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's intense.
One
It's
day?
one day.
That's insane.
It's an internationally known race.
Holy cow.
It's called Unbound Gravel, and
Oh, it's
y-
gravel?
yeah, it's a
Ugh.
gravel race.
Ugh. 200 miles on gravel? No, thank you.
I've ridden out there. It's pretty intense. I am not a cyclist, but I've ridden out there. But yeah, I make a prize for that race. I've made a prize for that race since 2013, and it's really cool that the it occurred to the organizers to have a prize as unique as a hand engraved plate that's printed. So the first year I did it on brass, and that did not hold up as well as I thought it would. And then I did it on copper. That worked better. And I stuck with copper for a while. And then they reduced the edition to 100 for the first 100 people. But then it got so competitive. Like they have racers that are Tour de France racers that
Wow.
it's like that level of
Wow.
racer that comes out here. That the last year they asked me to print 200 again. And as I can't do this, I don't want to do this on copper. I want it to look really tight. I want number one to look much closer to number 200. Usually, all the other works were scroll work, so it could kind of get away with it. On the new ones, there was figures. So I did Kansas wildlife on them, And the last one, the newest one, I did a turtle. I thought that would be funny, and but it's also about
Do they get
persistence.
it?
No, I told them about it, and they thought it
Okay.
was cool. I mean, it's funny, but it's also, it's about persistence, which is
Sure.
it's an endurance race. That's all about persistence. There was a box turtle that is at the Prophet Aquatic Research Center on campus, and it's named Turtleina. And I went out and they took it out, and that turtle is actually quite fast, and but I got good photos of it. So Turtleina is at the center of the composition, and I engraved it on steel. And it was just steel that I picked up at a hardware store and cut down and then sanded smooth and engraved on. And I could not, it looked so good. It looked printed so well. Like number one looks like number 200. No problem.
Wow.
No problem. No
Huh.
problem. Yeah, it looked awesome.
I would not have thought that. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know why. I know
I
nothing
mean,
about metal.
I suppose I should have a little asterisk here, with the exception of some burrs that were still on some of the early ones. It held up.
Huh.
Yeah, it looked really cool.
Did you mean to have the burrs there?
No, no. I know that Durer would use that as part of of modeling the form, but I don't always do that. Sometimes I mean I'll leave them in. It looks cool, but sometimes, if I don't think it's too obtrusive, I leave it. But sometimes I have to take them out. So it's more often than not, it's like a happy accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you ever work in color?
Yes, I have. Not a whole lot. I've worked. Oscar is. I learned from Oscar to use like an aquatint background plate to scrape like a faux mezzotint to print on top. I did that for a little bit, then I stopped because I was progressively getting more detailed, and I felt that the aquatint second plate was getting in the way of all of the line work. I Oscar is very good about not colorizing a plate.
Ah.
He he works on all, usually it's 3. He works on all 3 at the same time,
Huh.
so they meld together well. I just don't work that way. So what I started to do with some of at least these newer ones is, Alu Poupe method on it, and some of those end up looking pretty cool, or watercolor, add a little bit of watercolor to it, but that's about it.
I'm just looking at your the print of the the Twitter bird who is decaying, and there looks like you have spit bite behind it that's sort of light red pinkish.
Yeah.
Is that spit bite, I guess? Or what is
That's
that?
it is spit bite.
Yes.
Yeah, tweet, tweet, boom, that print.
Nice.
Yeah, so did all the engraving on that one first, and then it's actually, I mean, it is aquatint. I mean, it's spray aquatint, but it's actually it's I didn't use nitric or anything. I just used ferric chloride for that. I can't I mixed it with something. It may have been saliva. I may have like actually I think I did actually, because I wanted to. It's like there has to be spit in this for it to be. And
How
went
big
about
is it? On my screen, it's huge, but I suspect it's not very big.
that's 12 by 9.
Oh, that's bigger than I thought. That's great. I love that.
Thanks.
All
I
right.
should have. I haven't editioned that one. I think
You
I
have
have
not?
3 pulls of it.
Oh, wow.
So bad about that. I have a whole backlog of matrices that I've printed maybe about 5 times, 4 times. I
I
know.
think you're not alone in that. Yeah, back to Hader. He was notorious for putting, number 25 on of 25, but it being like the third.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his record keeping was terrible.
Oh, the more you tell me about Hater, the more I adore him.
I know. I don't know if you, there's a great video of him. There's several of them, film. I think this one was made by his son, Julian. And he's narrating and he's about to put the the plate into the acid bath to have it etch, and he slides it in and he goes, "Now, how long do we let it stay? Long enough for a cigarette." He smokes a cigarette.
Next to the bath?
Well, yeah,
Oh, God.
I'll send you a link. Oh God, I wish I'd met him. James, it was great talking to you. Thank you for coming on Platemark and talking to us about your work and the engraving program at Emporia State. Who knew?
And thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Platemark with Professor James Ehlers, a fine engraver and an even finer human being. As always, I need to thank Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Always appreciate it. And a reminder to you that any images we talk about will be over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. There's a support and donate button over there on the website. If you push it, you'll get two choices. You can sign on to be a monthly member at $5, and you also can self-determine an amount on a one-time donation basis. It'd be great to have you on board. I really appreciate the support from all of you. Okay, I think that's it. We'll see you next time.